So the first chapter in this book is all about motivation, which automatically captured my attention. Charles Duhigg, the author, says that he found through his research there are actually 2 ways that you can grow your own motivation. And the first starts with something that the Marine Corps implemented. Sometime during the 20th century, more and more people started signing up to join the military, and that meant a wider spectrum of people who needed to be trained. One leader in the military decided too many unmotivated people were joining the Marines, and he wanted to get to the bottom of how to create self-motivation. So he contacted many psychologists and started implementing new systems to create self-drive and internal motivation in these new recruits. So what did he change? Well, actually he changed a lot of stuff, but they all had one thing in common. All of the changes had the effect of increasing the internal locus of control within the recruits. So an internal locus of control, locus, L-O-C-U-S, means an internal feeling that what someone does has a direct influence and effect on their own destiny. Basically, they taught the Marines that their actions mattered. The opposite of learned helplessness, which is a psychological condition in which people think that no matter what they do, their circumstances will not change. So what about the other part of the motivation? Well, I have to tell you a story about a group of people who suddenly lost their motivation. So a psychologist started researching and found a group of people throughout history who once had been super driven and self-motivated, but one day they just lost their spark. Like literally no motivation to do anything. They were still there mentally, they could do math, they could do things they could do before, but they just lost their motivation. Some of these guys went from running $1 million business to watching TV all day, or literally staring at a wall for hours on end. So after some x-rays and other tests, the psychologist concluded that all of these people had little tiny pinpricks in their striata, which is the plural word for the part of the brain that controls rewards and habits. They had a super small amount of bleeding in their brain, and some of the people reported things when they lost their motivation, such as a wasp sting, falling and hitting their head, and a few other traumatic events. So the conclusion is that these people had brain bleeding in the part of their brain that controlled motivation. But something significant happened to one of these people. One guy and his wife were known for being super driven all throughout their marriage for the past 40 or 50 years. When the husband lost his motivation, the wife got super frustrated. And I would too. She tried everything. And after a few years, she started offering him choices. Do you want to wear this shirt or that shirt, honey? Pancakes or waffles? Little stuff like that. And eventually, he started to get more motivated. He started talking to more people on his own, cleaning up after himself. And the psychologist found out that choices increase our own motivation levels because it reminds us that we are in control. And humans, we love that feeling. We love knowing that we are in control. And now that I think about it, my mother gave me tons of choices when I was young, asking me, do you want to wear this shirt or that shirt before starting the day for school? Or what would you like for breakfast? And even, you have to do a chore, but do you want to do this chore or that chore? And I'm so blessed that my mother gave me that ability through her parenting. Thanks, Mom. Anyways, the psychologist did another test on the driveless people. He put them in an fMRI machine to measure their brain activity during a game. And the game was really simple. It was that these people had to guess if a random number was higher or lower than 5. So they either said higher or lower, and then the computer generated a number. Each number was between 1 and 10, but they had to guess if it was higher or lower than 5. It's pretty simple, right? Well, for some reason, these people loved the game. Like, they really loved it. They liked the fact that their choices were a game, and their striata lit up. The part of the brain with motivation lit up in the MRI machine. So the psychologist started another game, where the number was generated by a computer, and instead they didn't pick higher or lower. And he found that when they had no decision to make, no choice in whether they won or lost the game, the striata was dormant. So having a choice increases our motivation. Have you ever been sitting in a line that takes forever, or even on the highway during a traffic jam, and you see that exit over there, you can take it, and you know that it'll take longer for you to get home, but you take it anyways? Because that's you exercising your choice muscle and ultimately increasing your self-drive. So to increase our motivation levels, we have to do 2 things. Understand our own locus of control, that what we do actually has an impact on our destiny, and also make lots of choices. In fact, even if the choices are bad or defiant, like a teenager going over the speed limit or an elderly person rearranging their nursing home room, which they weren't allowed to do, which was actually in the study, will increase their drive. Wow, 800 words so far and I'm only in the first chapter. I guess I'll make the next chapters a little bit quicker. So chapter 2 is about teams and teamwork. After studying a whole bunch of group projects, basically the one factor that makes a great team is something called psychological safety. Psychological safety is a term for when a group has a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. It can be defined as being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences, of self-image, status, or career. So basically, create an environment where nobody harshly judges anybody else's idea. That's the best thing I got out of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is about focus. Charles describes focus as a flashlight, that we can shine it very dimly over a wide range of things, or we can zoom in to be super focused on one thing. And there are benefits to both, but in most emergency situations, our focus gets super intense on the wrong thing. And this is called cognitive tunneling. Cognitive tunneling can cause tons of errors, like even an airplane crash. After listening to the black box of an airplane that crashed, we can usually determine the major reason of a crash by listening to the narrative of the pilots. In the book, Charles shows how cognitive tunneling between two pilots caused an airplane crash, and how they panicked and focused on the wrong thing. Many other people do the same thing when they panic, but some specific people like firefighters, emergency response teams, and even some military trainees don't panic. So what's the difference? Well, Charles Duhigg found out it's something called mental modeling. So have you ever played out a conversation in your head before it happened? Or thought about working on something while laying in bed at night, visualizing how you are going to do it tomorrow? Well, this is called mental modeling, and Charles says by doing it, we are keeping our flashlight super intense and getting better at focusing the flashlight on what we desire. So when panic comes, we are better able to move it around to what it actually needs to be looked at. It's basically your brain's way of anticipating what's next, and if you do it enough, you'll get better and be able to think more clearly in difficult and emergency situations. This is why visualizing is so important in so many ways. Chapter 4 is probably the last one I'm going to be able to talk about, but it's about goals. So we've talked about SMART goals before, but if you've never heard of them, they were basically proved as part of the perfect goal setting experience. And I'll give you a basic rundown. So SMART is an acronym for how you should set up your goals. They are important because Duhigg says they turn vague aspirations into concrete plans, something you can actually do to get to where you want to be. So S stands for specific. I will run 5 miles. M stands for measurable, like can you actually measure the goal? Yes, you can actually measure 5 miles. A stands for actionable. For example, is 5 miles something you can actually do, or is it theory? Yes, it is something you can actually do. R stands for realistic. So basically, don't be aiming for 50 miles a day. Make it realistic. And T stands for time-bound or timeline. So make a goal for each day, and hopefully by the end of the month or after a specific amount of time, you'll be able to improve and reach your goal. So the second part of the perfect goal equation is the stretch goal. Jack Welch, the CEO of GE at the time, wanted to find a way to travel around Tokyo faster than a train. Basically, he said he wanted something to go 120 miles an hour. And at the time, the engineers said anything over 60 miles an hour would make the train tip over when it was going around a turn. Anything over 70 would be impossible, they said. Well, he gave them this stretch goal, and throughout time they figured out a way to get it done. Basically, to tunnel through the earth. If they hadn't have had this stretch goal, they would have never innovated enough to come up with this new super efficient way of traveling. Duhigg says that when we mix stretch goals with SMART goals, we can operate at peak goal setting and achieve more than we would without such goals. My stretch goal is to hit 10 million subscribers and to spread my love and knowledge of psychology. Well, that's all I have time for today. I hope you guys learned something from my little review, and if you want more, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.